All right, so I just got out of The Quiet Place, or A Quiet Place, sorry, A Quiet Place. And before I get into anything, any kind of specifics, obviously, as per usual, beginning of the review, no real spoilers. And then I'll be very clear when I say that there's going to be some form of spoiler. But before I get into it, I just want to say, go see this movie. Like, this is the best movie I've seen in ages, possibly in like years. Like, obviously, there's movies that have come out that are like, that I love, that are like Marvel movies or just like, you know, fun movies and stuff like this and stuff like that. But this movie has hit me harder than any movie in a really long time. For being kind of like a horror movie, it hit me in the same kind of way that something like The Green Mile would hit you in terms of like an emotional scale. But also an addendum to that, if you don't deal well with tension at all, like if you're somebody who really can't handle any kind of tension, hi Rocket, maybe don't go see this movie, or at least wait until it's like you can watch it at home and kind of separate yourself from the moment. Obviously, when you're in a theater, it's very hard to exit, to pull yourself out of a situation, to do something to kind of remove yourself from like a negative feeling emotion. If you notice my face is red, I'm gonna get into that. This was like, take off my jacket. It was just, either way, it was very, very, very good. So for those of you who don't know, A Quiet Place is a movie that was directed by John Krasinski. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because he played Jim in The Office. Yeah, that's right. Jim from The Office is now making really, really serious movies. And while some of you might be like, isn't it just a horror movie? Isn't it just like a run-of-the-mill kind of horror movie? It is so much more than that. This movie managed to build tension and character development in like such an absolutely amazing way that like right from the get-go, you care about all the characters, you care about their well-being, and it just continues that tension build just the entire time. I honestly can't think of a movie that did it in a better way. The last time I saw a horror movie that kind of had that level of tension and intensity, it would have been It Follows, but this goes so far beyond that in such a beautifully amazing way, which is kind of interesting to say for the style of movie it is. If you guys saw the trailers, just to give you a basic rundown, you get the idea that something has happened to humanity. We're kind of a little bit into the future, probably not too distantly in the future. Well, yeah, I know for a fact it's not too distantly in the future, but something's happened, and basically humanity's in a state where you can't make any noise. If you make noise, things attack you. And obviously the movie goes through. Oh, it doesn't go too far into detail. It doesn't do one of those like day zero type things and build into what led to where they are now. Really, it picks up about like 89 days into whatever this disaster is. It tells you right, like it actually says it right on the screen. It pretty much picks up 89 days into probably what I would presume would be the first incident or whatever happens. And it doesn't pander it. It doesn't go over it for too long. You basically just Rocket. You basically just see kind of like posters, like old like newspaper articles lying around that kind of tell you the brief idea of what happened. But then basically it's just John Krasinski and his family are trying to survive through this ordeal. And John Krasinski specifically describes it as being for his kids. And when I heard him say that in an interview, I was like, this is like, it kind of looks like a pretty scary horror movie and it's for his kids. But I guess the idea is that it's supposed to show exactly how far he or a father or a mother would go to protect their children, to go to protect their family. So it was just kind of like an ode to them. And honestly, when you see it, you'll be like, wow, that's really spot on. So it's very simple in nature when comparing it to something like Annihilation, just because similar undertones. Obviously, Annihilation is way more of like a sci-fi focused adventure. This kind of just has a sci-fi undertone to it, but this is way more of a self-contained story. And while there is clearly a larger scale thing happening in the world, you are very much just focused on this one family and what they're going through. And how they're trying to get, not out of the situation, but just try to live through the situation. So I would 100% recommend it, even if you're not necessarily a horror fan. As long as you don't hate horror, as long as you don't hate tension, I would definitely recommend going to see this in theaters, because I honestly believe that this should be supported. I think John Krasinski did an amazing job. I'm a huge fan of The Office, and I've had a really hard time seeing characters in The Office outside those roles, or at least outside comedy roles, especially somebody like John Krasinski. It's very hard to see him as anything other than, Jim. And this movie totally, just kicks kicks that out of me. And his wife in the movie is actually his wife in real life, Emily Blunt. And that itself seemed to just really add to things. It was just like a very beautiful project. And to know that he was involved in writing the screenplay, to know that he directed it and just really put it all together, and how beautifully it was shot, and how like the cinematography and just like little things that happen in every scene, and how it was directed and flowed as a movie was actually so amazingly well done. And obviously you had some jump scares, but it didn't really go for anything cheap. It kept you kind of on your toes the entire time, because you got something like, you've got a horror movie where the whole point is that people can't make noise. So you'd figure so that tension that normally gets built in horror movies when they quiet things down so they can jump scare you, that doesn't always happen here, because there's just so much silence. Because there's actually one character that really exemplifies that silence even to a higher degree. So because you can't rely on those usual auditory cues that you would in a horror movie, I honestly felt sick for like the first hour of the movie. And I know that sounds bad, but it was because I was so tense and just waiting for things to happen that I felt sick. And I don't want to say that in a bad way. I want to say that means that the movie did such an incredible job building the scene, building the tension, just building that whole emotion in the viewer. And everybody was the same way. Anytime anything little happened, like people were reacting, people were like putting their hands on their heads, just honestly, just so amazing. And it wasn't in like a cheap way that horror movies usually are, that was just specifically going out of its way to like psych you out, creep you out, gross you out. It was all just done because it was like shot incredibly well, acted incredibly well, and you were just totally immersed in this world that they had created, that John Krasinski and the other people had created. And I'm honestly blown away by it. It's definitely something I'm gonna buy on Blu-ray, because I want to support it. I want to support ideas like that, things that are kind of unique and different, and just things that can take part of one genre and blend it with another. I'm tearing up because it was so good. Like, it was just such an emotional ride. It was amazing. So please definitely go see it if you have any kind of interest in it whatsoever. If you like horror movies, if you like dramas, if you like just if you just like good movies, just go check it out. It was absolutely amazing. I think that it is going to be at the forefront of its genre for many years to come. I would say that like 10 Cloverfield Lane would have tried to have a similar feel to it, but couldn't hit it on the same emotional scale. Like, I think this is going to be a forerunner in its category, which is so unique in that genre, and also very unique for something directed by somebody who came up in the world as a comedy actor. So absolutely incredible. Now we're going into a few more of the spoilers. I'm going to talk about things specifically that I really enjoyed that they did. So this is heavy spoiler territory. I honestly implore you, if you have not seen the movie yet and you're planning on watching the movie, just don't watch past this point. Please don't watch past, like, I never say this, but I'm actually like, I would really encourage you to just click off this video if you haven't seen the movie yet and you're planning on seeing the movie. Please click off this video. This is just me talking about things that I really liked. Even if you were the type of person that likes spoilers, please just click off this video. Please click off this video right now. Okay, we're going into them. So right from the get-go, you kind of get the, you know what happened. It just starts off in kind of like a drugstore. One of the kids is sick, and they're just kind of looking for some kind of medicine that would help him with whatever he's sick with. So at this point in time, it's, mom, dad, 3 kids. Sick kid, a girl, and a younger son. There ends up being this moment where that kid picks up a toy. The younger one picks up a toy, has batteries in it. And they take it away from him. They take the batteries out, and then they leave the toy there. But then the daughter or the sister ends up just giving him back the toy, but not the batteries. But then he grabs the batteries before he's leaving. And they're walking home, and for some reason, he's at the back. Honestly, that was probably the only not believable thing, is that if this was that kind of world and you had the youngest son, I'm pretty sure that even if you weren't carrying him, he wouldn't be at the back. You'd probably have him in the middle somewhere, just because, for one, he's young. 2, he seems to not fully grasp the severity of the situation. And he's like the smallest one. He's more prone to walk off, and he's in behind the sister, who I didn't mention. She's deaf. She can't hear anything, and that actually adds a really interesting dynamic to the whole thing, because she can't hear, she can't even necessarily tell how loud she's being, she can't necessarily hear what things going on around her, so that's an interesting dynamic. But I feel like you wouldn't put the youngest kid behind the deaf child. That's just and he's like pretty young. I would say he was probably like 5 or 6 years old. He was pretty young. So he ends up turning on the toy, it starts making noises, and everything just, it's like that whole scene was shot so incredibly well. Everything just stops. Nobody's saying everything. Everybody is just like, you get a close up on Emily Blunt's face, and like you can tell that she knows it's too late. John Krasinski is just flat out running to try to catch him, and like when he's, I don't even know, from like from here to the wall away from him, something, it just crashes out of the wood and grabs him, and then it's done. And like right there from the beginning, they establish that nobody is safe. Not a single person in this family, not a single person in this movie is safe. If they are willing to kill the youngest child, nobody is safe in this movie. So that's at 89 days in. And then it cuts ahead to like 472 days in. So it gives you about a little over a year in between when that happens and later on. So right there, that really set the tone for everything. That set an emotional tone right from the beginning. And then when it cuts ahead, you find out that, you know, mom's pregnant with another baby. And that whole thing is like, what happens when the baby is born? The babies are loud. How are you going to deal with it? Just oh my God, it's just dealt with so well. And then there's obviously that deals with, there's like a whole tension because the daughter blames herself. So that turns into its whole other dynamic, and oh my God. And then you have like, you know, John Krasinski as a father is trying to do his best to take care of his family, provide for his family, but obviously he gets a little stern because he's just trying to protect people. And she kind of gets the idea that maybe he blames her for, you know, the son dying, but then the mom blames herself because she could have been carrying him. And it's just such like this beautiful dynamic as it goes through there. And that just because they take that kid dies so early on, you're like, okay, absolutely nobody is safe in this movie. So every little time something would happen, you'd be waiting. It'd be like, there's like a TVs that showed everything going around on the perimeter. And at one point she's watching, you know, John Krasinski's character, you know, going to get the other kids. And you're like, oh my God, she's alone and she's just watching these TVs. Something's going to come up behind her. Because it's like, they're trying not to make noises, so they don't shut doors. They don't do anything that can make that extra amount of noise. So when these things get into houses, they can just walk in. But they just usually don't, because they're completely blind. Everything they do is based on sound. In terms of the monsters themselves, you find out they're aliens, which it's cool. They didn't pander. They didn't go into too much explanation. They just say they're heavily armored, so you can't really shoot at them. Nobody really knows what the weakness are. They can't see anything, and literally they just have super hearing. So the second they can hear you, they can basically find you. But otherwise, you're not really at jeopardy from them. It's very interesting. But I was actually surprised that they showed them, and they showed them really early. When the kid gets attacked, you see it. You kind of get the idea of what it looks like, and then it progressively kind of shows you more what they look like as the movie went on, more so than I thought. But it's really so that they can kind of exemplify what happened. I actually really liked what the weakness ended up being, and it actually made sense. It's like, if you have something that can hear so incredibly well, obviously something with high frequencies would probably bother it. So that was really cool. I like that it was self-contained. I like that he has a whiteboard with all the information. They think there's 3 in the area. By the end of the movie, you're left in a situation where you think that, okay, they can probably take care of this. But there's like this super emotional moment with John Krasinski protecting the kids. And it's like, I start crying in the theater, thinking about it right now. I want to cry. And I like I said, when I go see movies, I try to feel whatever the director and the creators are trying to get you to feel. If I feel like I'm going to cry, I don't try to hold the tears back. I just let them happen, because that's what they're trying to get you to feel. And here I go. I'm actually crying because it was that emotional. It was so amazing. Like I said, with certain parts of this movie, really, like, the only other movie I can think of that elicited this kind of emotional reaction was Green Mile. And Green Mile is like one of the saddest movies in the world. And this is supposed to be a horror movie, but it's amazing. So I think that those were some of the really strong moments. I know this is the spoiler part, but I'm really hesitant to even talk about more spoilers, because I know some people can't help themselves. But I just, go see it. It was amazing. It was so well done. It wasn't one of these things where you're trying to figure out how to save the rest of the world, but you're left in a situation where, like, hey, okay, humanity might end up being okay, but it really is just focusing on this family, their struggles, and how they're going to make it out in the end. So honestly, fantastic job. Like, literally the second I finished watching the movie, I tweeted, said amazing job to John Krasinski, because I honestly think that he needs an award for this. He needs an award for this. If this is not nominated for an Oscar next year, I'm going to be super pissed off. You guys are going to see a video about me yelling A Quiet Place was not nominated. And I'm talking Best Picture. I'm not talking like cinematography. I'm not talking side stuff. I'm talking Best Picture, because this is the best movie I've seen in years. I think, honestly, because I'm crying right now. Oh my God. Go see this movie. It was fantastic. Don't judge me for the emotional reaction. That's going to do it for today's video. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and we'll catch you all later.